me to plan on standing. I'm going to be between here and here mostly.
You plan on going to
The podium.
podium?
You want me to not do it? I can put notes down here.
That'll make it a little bit of a challenge, but it's doable.
Let me see.
No, it's fine. I can do it that way.
On the other hand, I'll be tripping over this wire constantly. Yeah, let me move down.
So will you point at me when it's my turn?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to have a lengthy introduction and then I'll call on you.
All right, I will do a little intro, just welcoming you a moment, if that's
Oh,
okay?
yeah, sure.
Yep, okay. All right. Should we go ahead, David, or should I wait a second?
David needs a second, I think.
Yep. Test. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Real program. We are grateful to have Pastor Stephen Eastman here with us. He has been a pastor in the Church of the United Brethren for about 40 years. He spent many years studying Christianity in the context of the Jewish faith and making presentations like he's going to for us today. So we welcome you and we thank you for your time.
Pleased to come and share with you. This is always a special event for me. I'm always happy to do it. It's good to have you here this morning. Welcome. I've been having an interest in, as a pastor, I've always had an interest in our heritage, our Jewish heritage, the Old Testament, and always felt that the New Testament unlocks the Old, but you got to understand the Old as well. And so I've spent a lot of time studying, especially the Jewish festivals. And the Jewish festivals start with Passover, and most people are generally familiar with that. Most Christians are. In fact, let me see a show of hands. How many of you have ever attended or a Passover dinner or attended a presentation of one? Okay, that's about half of you. Okay, I've done presentations, but I've also done dinners where we had a couple hundred pastors once who just gathered around tables and we taught them this stuff so that they could take it back to their congregations. And it's just a lot of fun, but it doesn't end with Passover. There's so many other festivals in the Old Testament that we could study. And what happened was I got interested in Passover, learned how to do it myself, did it with my family in my church, and I've done it with my family ever since. By the way, David is my son, and I'm happy to have here running behind the scenes, and we could probably switch places, except that I'd get lost with the electronics. But he knows what's going on up here. At any rate, we raised our kids doing Passover, and then I asked myself the question, well, what Passover does is a lot like Christmas in that it teaches children. Like if any children who are asked the question, where was Jesus born, they could tell you. How did Joseph and Mary get to Bethlehem? They could tell you. All the questions that we could ask them about the Christmas story, they know the answer to. Why? Because they celebrate Christmas every year. And but in a Jewish family, if you ask the questions about redemption, see, Christmas is about the incarnation, but Passover is about redemption. And so Jewish children understand the story of being slaves in Egypt and how they were released from that and went to the promised land. They understand this because they celebrate it. They're kids. They celebrate holidays. And so I thought, well, our kids are celebrating Passover. I'll bet there are other celebrations we could do that would also teach children how to understand their faith better. And sure enough, there's Shavuot, which is fascinating. It's a very simple thing to understand, and it teaches children about the Bible and about how important God's word is and the law. It's an excellent way to raise children because it's got good food too. And by the way, this meal, if we were to have the whole meal, it would rival Thanksgiving. And plus the foods that are here are all very traditional. And if we have time, you can ask questions about those dishes. But I'm the cook in our family, so that's what I love to do is cook Jewish food. So at any rate, Shavuot, then there's the fall festivals, and each one, if we were to do them, I sat down once and I wrote down all of the things that you could learn from all of the festivals. And, basically, it's everything you want a child to know about theology. It's a way to teach a child theology painlessly because they look forward to all the holidays. And so now I'm thinking, Christians, we really missed out on something, because if we had been doing all of the holidays and eating all the good food and having all the fun, we'd be teaching our children all that they really need to know about theology. And I've always said Sunday school is wonderful, but it's not enough. We've got to teach our children in the homes. We have to raise them and reading the Bible and doing things like that. So basically, that's where I come from. I studied these things and got really excited about them, and am happy to share Passover with you. This is a Haggadah. It's something that every family has. I'll tell you now that their books are a lot thicker than mine, and when they have their meal, they follow the Haggadah. They follow it through and read their portions, and it takes about 3 to 4 hours for dinner. Well, we don't have 3 or 4 hours, and my children were never that patient. So I wrote this Haggadah based on other Haggadahs, and it boils everything down to something we can manage in an hour today. So I think you understand why I feel strongly about following this Jewish holiday, and especially Passover, because as I studied it, I realized that Passover in particular is very Christian. It's amazingly Christian. It has symbols and ideas, and some of you know that when we celebrate communion was taken from the Passover. It was what Jesus did the night he had the Last Supper, and the Last Supper was a Passover, and he was with his disciples. I'm going to just stick in some bunny trails from time to time here. The disciples did not look like Leonardo da Vinci thinks they did. Okay? First of all, they were not sitting at a table, and if they were, they'd have sat around the entire table, not just one side. And secondly, they would have been down, and they would have been reclining. And thirdly, these guys were teenagers. They were not old men with beards. These were young men, and they were going to last a long time after Jesus left. Jesus was their teacher. They were his pupils. He was the rabbi. They were disciples. And so they were young guys. And so when he got together with them, especially John was the youngest one, and he was just in his teen years, and he leaned against Jesus and loved him so much. And that gives us a picture of how these guys interacted with Jesus. But when he did the Passover with them, they knew what was going on because they had done Passover in their families with their dads and moms. And so when Jesus did it and introduced, he said, now this bread has a different significance, and so does this cup of wine. And so they heard new things, but they were familiar with the effort that they were all doing around the table. This was all old stuff for them. They'd grown up doing it. They knew what the significance of things were. And Jesus was spending a very, very personal time, just the rabbi and his disciples. So something interesting to note, Gamaliel was a rabbi who defined all of the things that we're going to do this morning. What I mean by that is he set down, for years, Passover was celebrated by word of mouth. Well, we'll all do this, we'll all do that. And the rabbis would teach the new generation of rabbis, and they would teach the people. So word of mouth was how they did all of their traditions. And at one point, they had to sit down and let's write it up. Gamaliel was the rabbi who did that. He said, we're going to make sure everyone's doing it the same and the right way. And the things I'm going to show you are because of Gamaliel. We know that that's what he wanted us to do. Guess when Gamaliel lived and walked the earth? Jesus' time. In fact, when Jesus was 12 years old, he was in the temple. And what do we know about Jesus at 12 years old? And we need to get something clear. People, when they think about Jesus in the temple asking questions, and they're amazed at his questions, we think of teachers and pupils, right? We think, wow, who wouldn't like to have a student that asks great questions? But that's not the case. Because in Jesus' time, the one who asks the questions is the rabbi. And Jesus was 12 years old, and they were amazed at the questions. In other words, he was teaching them, they were not teaching him. At 12 years old. It's a whole new way to look at that event. When I found that out the first time, I was just, oh, this is amazing. Jesus was teaching them. And Gamaliel would have been among them. And Gamaliel was the one who wrote this stuff down. And as you see, as we walk through this together, you're going to see a picture of Jesus emerge from this meal. And it will amaze you because you'll know that Jesus was a part, probably. This is conjecture. This isn't in Scripture. But we know when Gamaliel was in the temple, we know when Jesus was in the temple, and we know that Gamaliel wrote it all down. So we can put together that Jesus was influential in this meal. Now, the Jews have kept the Passover traditions alive through the years, and I'm just so grateful for the families who do all of these things. And if we had a Jewish family in here, I doubt if anyone would take exception with what I'm going to show you, because they were raised understanding a lot of this stuff. And the thing that makes this most interesting is it's not really complete without the Messiah. It's Jesus that makes the difference. So we'll see the picture of the slaves in Egypt and escaping, and the 10 plagues, we'll see all of that. But we'll see how the redemption from slavery is the redemption from sin that Jesus brings. Isn't that amazing that the redemption shows up so beautifully between the two? So we appreciate what has been done for us and taught us so far, and I'm going to pass some of those things on to you. Another interesting thing, this isn't exactly a bunny trail, but it is an aside, that in Holy Week that we just went through between Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, okay, that week, Holy Week, do you want to guess what period a multitude of prophecies, how many prophecies took place in that single week? It was 4,000 years, and in 1 week and 1 day, 4,000 years of prophecy all came true at one time. And then later other things, of course, and before then, Jesus' birth was prophesied. But in that single week of Passover week, when Jesus died, we know that a huge amount of prophecies came through at that single time. And so I want to suggest that this is an object lesson that we're going to do. The whole thing is full of object lessons. And as we do it, you need to know that it was no accident that it all coincided with the death of Jesus and his resurrection. It all happened at the same time. And a case could be made, in fact, that God allowed Joseph to go to Egypt and then his family to follow, and then years to go by and they become slaves, that God allowed an actual historical event, that it really happened. He allowed it to happen so that we would have a better picture of redemption, because he intended to redeem these slaves. And so God has the best object lessons. I used to be a Sunday school teacher myself, and I knew that object lessons were really great because kids really connect with object lessons. So do adults. Everybody does. But God is the perfect one to do it because he makes history and then makes history an object lesson. And we see all of these things come so. So when God wants to teach something important, he uses parables, he uses object lessons, hands-on teaching, and Jesus always did that, and so that's what we're going to do. It's a hands-on experience of Passover. And Passover, we're taught by rabbis, modern rabbis, that it's more than a commemoration of the slavery and being released from Egypt, but it's a present personal involvement. And that's true when you add Jesus, because when Jesus redeems us, it changes everything. In the Talmud, these are Jewish writings, it says, in every generation a man must regard himself as if he himself came out of Egypt. So let me just make a few comments, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them, although there's probably a place a little bit further on in the meal that we'll stop and I'll ask for questions. But this is informal, so if you have a burning question that needs to be answered now, feel free to bring it up. The yarmulkes that the men are wearing, it's an abbreviation of a Hebrew word. Yarmulke is a Hebrew word, and it's an abbreviation of stand in awe of God. And so it's, like I was saying earlier, it's a little counterintuitive because usually it's women that wear a head covering in our traditions, and men don't wear hats in church. But in Jewish traditions, to stand in awe of God, it would be rude to come to God without a covering. So the men cover their heads with yarmulkes. And since only 80% of you speak Hebrew fluently, I'm going to conduct all of this in English. I'm going to throw in a few Hebrew words for you, but basically we're going to do this in English this morning. This Haggadah has a mix of scripture, Jewish tradition, and Christian tradition. Christian traditions have been added to what we're going to study just so that you can see Christ in the Passover, okay? Let's see if there's anything else I want to say right here. Probably not. Let's go ahead and begin our service. And it begins in the family with the mother. My wife loves being the mother. And it's the mother's privilege on every Sabbath to light the Sabbath candles. But especially on Passover, it's the mom's privilege to start the service with lighting of the candles. So I'm pleased to let you come in and be the mom, and thank you for it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sent the only Son, Jesus the Messiah, to be the light of the world and our Passover lamb, that through him we might have life. Amen.
Thank you. We have a prayer time at this time, and of the meal in the family, and this is kind of cool. My wife is. Are we all set?
No, I thought we were doing the.
Oh, you're right, but I'm sorry. I'm doing a bunny trail again. In our family, Barbara has really helped me and blessed me as we've developed this together. She can't be with us this morning, but there's a time of prayer for the children in the family. Our kids are all grown up and have jobs of their own, but they all come home for Passover. It's as important to them as Christmas time. Christmas, Passover, those are the times we get together. So in the formal way of doing things, the father goes to the sons and puts his hand on their heads. And I'm going to read something that you'll see both Jewish and Christian, and this is a blessing that the Father does. He says, "May the Lord make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, and like Peter, Andrew, and John, and like the other disciples who loved and followed Jesus." And then to the daughters, he says, "May the Lord make you like Sarah, Esther, and Ruth, like Mary and Martha, and other faithful women who ministered to Jesus." And we've expanded that to not just being a written prayer, but to be a prayer from the heart. And so when I put my hand on David's head, I pray specific things that are needs in his life and ask God's blessing on him. And what a wonderful opportunity to bless people. When you are with someone who is grieved or going through some difficult time, placing your hand on their shoulder and praying for them, you cannot believe how encouraging a single thing like that can be. And perhaps you've been encouraged in that way. So that's what we do. And then, now we can do our ritual washing. This is not, we're going to assume that when people come to our dinner table that they've already washed their hands. You wash your hands before you come to dinner. But so this is a ritual washing, and it kind of reminds us of Psalm 24. Who can finish this for me? Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? One who has clean hands and a pure heart, okay? So clean hands is what we're going for, and you can come over here and help me. We pass this around the table, so the first person, this is our bowl for the hand washing, the first person puts his hand over the bowl like this, and the person next to him pours water over the hands. And I failed to bring my, oh, here it is. This is a ritual towel to go with the ritual water. And then you notice that this has two handles, so I can take it from her and then go to the next person, and we can keep switching without fumbling or dropping it because of the two handles. So we'll wash your hands. And then the next person and the next person, it just goes around the table like that. Everyone's had an opportunity. Oh, no, we're not going to do it this morning. I'm sorry. There are a few things that would take up so much time that I think you'd rather learn about it, even though you can't participate. I'm sorry I can't serve you potato kugel. You know, that's a major meal, part of the meal, and it's great and traditional. We also don't have any cherosith this morning, and you'll learn about that in a minute. But basically, it's just going to be a learning session as we watch and look at the things that we're going to share with. Now, the very first thing that happens is we raise a cup. And I'm going to ask you to participate in this part. I have a few things to say, and then it will be on the overhead, and you can read what's up there. As you lift the cup, and by the way, we're going to drink from this cup 4 times, so don't chug it. Okay, just sip it, and make sure that you have 3 more sips left by the end of the meal. If you forget and you need to drink something right now, go ahead, we've got more and we can refill your cup later. But for now, we're just going to sip. And this is what the Father says. Let us rededicate ourselves to God this evening. So as we worship, we will come to fully realize that we owe God for his redeeming work among us. Let us thank God because he redeemed our ancestors from slavery, making them a free people. Let us thank God because he has rescued us from the bondage of our sin, making us free to love and serve him. And here's the blessing in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. And then you read this part. When it shows up. Oh, okay. I will say, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who created the fruit of the vine." And we'll move on from there. Let's see. And let's take a sip. Now, it's important to understand that we drink 4 times during the meal. We know that Jesus drank with the disciples 1 from our traditions, reading in the New Testament. But we know from tradition that he actually drank 4 times. And every cup has its own name. So I want you to know that the first sip that you had this morning is the sip from the cup of blessing or sanctification. And the words in the book of Exodus, "I will bring you out." That's God's promise to us. Okay? And so we just drank the cup of blessing. And Jesus would have known it at that time because it's been called that since his time. So that was the cup we just drank from. And you can just remember it for me because there'll be a quiz, okay? We now understand that in Exodus 12, Moses instructed his people to take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood of the basin, and put some of the blood on top and both sides of the door frame. Do we have that photograph? Okay, so what happens at this point, we know the story about the hyssop and the blood on both sides of the post. Everyone understands that part. And then the top. Why? Because the death angel was going to pass over. So to commemorate that thought, we dip our parsley, and I have this really cool thing that says salt water. Get to use it once a year, and every time I do a presentation like this. And you dip the parsley into the salt water, give it a few shakes, pass the salt water to the next person, and everyone takes some parsley. And then after the parsley, we say, we don't have any dialogue to share? Okay. We say, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who created the fruit of the earth." And then everyone partakes of it. Okay? And then we go on to the next portion, and I want you to see something that's really, in my estimation, one of the coolest things about this celebration, and that is, this is a matzah tosh, and you see the pieces of matzah that are at your table, but in here are the original pieces. And this is what a piece of matzah looks like, and we have, most of you have seen it, I'm sure, but this is the only bread that we use for this celebration. But inside this tosh, I just opened the first pocket. There's a second pocket, and in there is also a piece of matzah, okay? And then there is a third, 3 pockets, and inside there is another piece of matzah, yes. And these are, every family has their own. This is something that all Jewish families have. And not sure where to tell everything I know about this. If you ask a rabbi, which I did, I had a Passover meal with a rabbi, and I asked him what the 3 pockets meant. And he said, "We don't know." He said, "We think it means unity." That makes sense. Okay, some of you might have some other ideas, but we'll talk about that a little later. But I'm going to take the center piece, I'm going to break it, and then put that on that plate, which is a serving plate for matzos, and take the afikomen bag, This is called the afikomen. It's half of the middle piece. I didn't take it from the first pocket. I didn't take it from the last pocket. No one ever does in any Jewish family. They only take it from the middle, and they always break it. And then once it's broken, this is one of the fun parts of the meal, especially for children. They put it in the afikomen bag, and I don't want to walk too far off camera, but this is what you do with the afikomen bag. There is the half a piece in here, and then the father takes it, leaves the room with it, and hides it. Now, that sounds like a fun thing, yet at the same time, you'll see how very serious this is as a symbol, okay? And so I'm going to hide it here, and pay attention in case I make everybody scramble to find it, because the children will get a prize, the one who finds it. So you probably stand the best chance of getting the prize if I call for that, which I don't worry, I won't. So the afikomen is hidden and set aside, and when the father holds it up before he hides it, he says, "This is the bread of affliction, the simple bread which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let those who are hungry join us at this table. Let them partake of what we have to share. Likewise, may the many who hunger for God, who are enslaved by their sins, and find fulfillment and freedom through Jesus." Now, this is a great tradition that we're coming on now. It's where the youngest child has to read or recite questions. Now, Nate has volunteered to be our youngest child, and he is, I remember when I was in high school, we had a teacher who was she was Jewish in high school, and she told us about, she was the youngest child. Now, it's usually the youngest male child, but in most families now, it's the youngest child, doesn't matter male or female. And she said she was so nervous. Don't be nervous. Okay. She said she was so nervous because she had to memorize it. He has a cheat sheet. I just gave it to him. And but she had to memorize it, and so she took her pen and she wrote the questions on the palm of her hand because she was so afraid that she was going to forget the questions when it came her turn to talk. And so this is the youngest child's special privilege to ask the questions. And you can see how it's symbolic of learning. What is this all about? I don't get it. So he's got one major question to ask, and then he's got the 4 famous questions. And the 4 famous questions are, can I go to the bathroom? Is it over yet? When do we eat? By the way, if you come to Passover at our house, it's a good hour of this sort of thing before we actually do eat. So if you come hungry, you're going to be hungrier by the time we eat. And the last question, do I have to eat that? Because often kids aren't too excited about eating parsley. But we shall see. Those are, he's got better questions, so let's go ahead.
Father, why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights we may eat either leavened or unleavened bread, but on this night we eat only unleavened bread. On other nights we may eat any kind of herbs. Tonight we eat only bitter herbs. Other nights we do not dip even once, but on this night we dip twice. Other nights we eat sitting or reclining as we please, but this night we eat reclining.
Thank you. Those are the 4 questions, and then the father usually answers the questions, or else others do, and I wonder if you can help me answer the questions. The first question was, on all other nights we eat either leavened or unleavened bread, but tonight only unleavened. Who knows the answer to that? Why do they only eat unleavened bread at Passover? Right. The very first Passover, they didn't have time to use yeast and have the bread rise. They were in a hurry. And so they used unleavened bread. That's the physical answer. What's the spiritual answer? Anyone know? What does leavening represent? Sin, exactly. So the spiritual lesson we learn from it is that the unleavened bread doesn't have leavening, which represents sin. And you'll see as we move along that that's very important to understanding. The second question, other nights we may eat any kind of herbs, but tonight we eat only bitter herbs. Anyone know the answer to that? Why bitter herbs? It's to remember the bitterness of slavery. And if it's bitter to be enslaved in Egypt, it's also bitter to be enslaved to sin. How many would testify that when there's sin in your life, it's bitter, it hurts you, it holds you back? You can't be everything you want in your relationship with God if you're hiding sin in your life. It's bitter. And so tonight we use bitter herbs, and I'll explain what they are when we get there. Other nights we do not dip even once, but on this night we dip twice. The first time is when we dip the hyssop, and I already told you what that means, but it has a secondary meaning. The salt water represents the tears of the slaves, and if you've ever tasted your own tears, let it drip right down your cheek, and it gets in your mouth, you know that it's salty, and that's what the dipping of the parsley. And we haven't done it yet, but the next time we dip, it will be a piece of matzo with bitter herbs. And it's, in this case, it means the same thing. It's the matzo and the horseradish talks about the bitterness. We add a little cheraseth, which is an apple salad, to it, and that makes it easier to accept. But the bitterness is there because of sin. Okay, and then finally, the last question he asked was, other nights we eat sitting or reclining as we please, but tonight we eat reclining. Well, have you ever tried to eat reclining? I've never asked my family to sit on the floor and eat. We just can't, I can't do it. I've got to sit in a chair with a table in front of me. But, and many Jewish families do the same thing, but to represent the idea of reclining, they bring their pillows to the table and put it behind them in their chairs. And that represents reclining. Do you know why it would be important to recline at this meal? Anyone? David?
Because slaves have to stand while they eat.
Slaves have to stand while they eat, and they are not slaves, they're free, so they can recline. And reclining is kind of an important thing. I shouldn't have done that. Although I know he could recite, I told you, he could do this program as well as I could, I'm sure. Once we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord, in his goodness and mercy, brought us out forth of the land with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. At this point, we tell the story of Egypt, and I'm not going to tell you the story because I'm going to assume that you attended Sunday school at some point in your lives. And you know the story of Joseph in Egypt, and then how after he died, the people of his family grew in number, and they were enslaved by the Egyptians, and God set them free. Moses was sent, and there were 10 plagues trying to convince Pharaoh to let them go. And finally, he let them go, and they were able to escape. And so I'm going to do this one quickly. How am I doing on time? I think I'm going a little slow here. Let me speed up a little bit. This is a table setting. In our family, we use our best inherited china. We never afforded any of our own, but we inherited some, so we're really pleased to have it. And Barbara made me promise that I'd hold this very carefully. Okay, so what happens is, in the family, everyone recites the 10 plagues. And as they do, the mother dips her finger in the Passover wine, and if somebody says one of the plagues, somebody give me a plague. What was one of them? Huh? Water turned to blood. Okay, she'll tap it, and now there's a dot of wine on the plate. And then like a clock, every time we name one, she puts another dot on, and that way we keep track of if we get 10 or not. Okay, so we're going to at least think through some of these if we can come up with 10. And I'm looking for a master list that I have. Oh, here it is. I've gone through the 10 so many times I can tell you what they are, but I've got an interesting thing to add to each one. You said blood. Did you know that each of the plagues related to an Egyptian god? In other words, when Moses was bringing all these plagues on them, he wasn't just saying, well, frogs and lice, let's make them all miserable, and picking things at random. He was picking specific things. There is the god of the Nile. His name is Happy. I don't think he was so happy that day when his water turned to blood. And so God was actually challenging Happy by saying, look, we have the power, and my people have the power, and we're changing the water into blood. So it was a way to attack that false god. Someone give me another one. Locusts. Okay. Locusts are in the insects and the locusts that came are from the god Shu. And it's the dry air and the wind. He's the god of the dry air. And the reason why that fits with the insects is simply because they were like dust over the face of the earth. And so that god was shamed when the locusts came. Someone give me another one. Hail. Okay, Hail is the god of, oh, this is a good one, Nut. That's his name, God Nut, and he is the god of the weather and the hailstones and like that. And the other ones are frogs, which is Hegel, lice, which is Geb, death of the livestock. There was a god for livestock. His name was Apis. There were boils on the people. That god's name was Heka. And the darkness and death, all of these had names. Ra was the god of the sun. And he lost when it became dark. And then finally, death. The creator of man was Amun-Ra. And when the firstborn started to die, it was an attack on that god. And so all these things happened, and very specific reasons. The more you study the Old Testament and understand the New, the more you see connections and reasons for things that happen. And that's just been a blessing to me through my life. Now, okay, now moving on. Let's go to the next portion here. I'd like to say that we have the second cup, and so you can take it and let me read the blessing. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has redeemed us and our ancestors and brought us to this occasion. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, the people say, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. And we may all take a sip. Now, the cup you just sipped from also has a name. And this name is judgment. What was the first cup? Blessing. Second cup, judgment. Now, the Exodus statement, promise from God, is, I will free you. And that goes with this cup, the cup of judgment. Okay, the next thing that we do, and you can participate with this, but I'm not giving you horseradish, if you don't mind. I know that disappoints horseradish fans, but it probably also relieves some of you who are not too excited about taking raw horseradish. But I have some horseradish, and at this point in the meal, this is the second time we dip. Okay, so the first time we did it with parsley. This time we do it, and we take a little bit of horseradish. A little bit, he said. Normally I just pile it on, but I've got to keep talking. So I'm just going to put a little tad here. That's probably enough to clear my nasal passages. And then by tradition, they add cherasith. Cherasith is, do we have a picture of that? Okay, cherasith is an apple salad that's all chopped up into little tiny pieces, and it's got cinnamon and ginger and honey and a little bit of Passover wine in it. And it is horrible looking. It looks terrible. You've got to convince the children to try it. It is delicious. It tastes so good, and you take a spoonful of that and eat it, and it is excellent. And the tradition is that you add this to this so that you can add a little sweetness to the bitterness. And when something I've taught in the past is by tradition, and this is just Jewish family tradition. This is not Gamaliel. Okay. This is just something that's kind of arisen, and that is men believe that if you're truly a man, you'll put enough horseradish on this to bring tears to your eyes because you're a man. Okay? And so I've taught this from time to time, and I remember through the years people that took me at my word. Excuse me. And one time when David was really small, he saw his dad up in front of the crowd doing a service like this, and I was saying that you've got to put as much on as you can. And his mom lost track of what he was doing, and he took a huge spoonful, packed it on that, and then he ate it. And his face turned red. He started coughing and hacking and jumping up and down. And he isn't the first to have had that experience. It was so hot, and he just wasn't ready for it. Nowadays, you do pretty well. He puts more on than most people do, I think, as I look around the tables, and has no problem eating it. But his first taste of horseradish, it's a wonder that he ever did it again. I remember a story about a little boy who insisted that his parents let him have the horseradish, and they said, no, you're too young. You shouldn't have horseradish. And he just absolutely insisted. So his mom put a little bit of horseradish on a cracker and gave it to him, and he ate it and then spit it out, and he said, what part of the horse was that from? He wasn't ready at all for what he was about to taste. So that's what we do at this point in the meal. And we've done our second cup, and we've taken our matzah and horseradish. And you can take your pieces of matzah. Everyone just take one. They're probably within reach. Just take one. And we'll just eat it together. The Father says, blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to eat the bitter herbs. So even though you don't have bitter herbs on your matzah, you can eat it and cough if you like. And if anyone here has an inside place that they know that they can reliably buy hot horseradish, please let me know after the service. I'm always in a quest to find the hottest that I can find. And you end up, if you go to Myers, you end up with this mild stuff that doesn't really, you can taste the horseradish, but I like mine hot. Now is the time that we would normally eat the dinner. And this is a good time to answer questions. So if you have any question, but let me share a few things. Let's see the Seder plate. Is that next? Okay, this plate, actually this picture is my plate. It's our plate, our family plate. For years, this is what we've used. And you never really do anything with it, except if you have guests, it becomes the plate that explains the symbols. And so you can explain symbols by looking at that plate. I have one here this morning, a new one that I just got recently. It's a real nice ceramic one. And you place the symbols of the event on the plate. Now, I'll just show you what some of them are. In this case, can anyone tell me what it is? Anyone want to guess? What? No? It's a little obscure. This is horseradish before it gets ground up and served, is what a root of horseradish. And so I keep it there because it has that significance. Also, as you'll see in the picture, the horseradish there is one of the symbols, only it's all ground up and it's ready to use to put on your matzo. And this does not count. This is Arby's horsey sauce. Don't get Arby's horsey sauce. You've got to get the real thing, okay? This has no place on a Passover plate. I'm just going to toss it over there, okay? But this is the horseradish, and that's. Oh, there I am, and that's the picture of the horseradish. Okay, then here, you notice an egg on the plate. Why an egg? This is another thing that Jewish people don't really understand. Well, we don't know. But some of them say it's there to remind them of the sacrifices. Who here has ever owned chickens? Anyone ever owned chickens? Okay. How often do chickens lay eggs? One chicken. When does he lay his eggs? Her.
Once a day.
Once a day. At night or in the morning? Once a day in the morning. That's when they lay their eggs. So that also happens to be the time of the sacrifices. Once a day in the morning. So we'll take that as our meaning for why we have a roasted egg. Okay? And I'm always putting my eggs in the oven and roasting them, and they just look like any other eggs, only sometimes they break. This is a shank bone from a lamb from our very first Passover in the family. We've had this for years. It's the shank bone, and it represents the lamb that was slain. It had to be a lamb, and you understand the importance of lambs in sacrifices. And this was the very first one for Passover. And then you see, well, I guess I need to explain this. Someone will ask. That's lettuce in case you chicken out and don't want to eat the horseradish. Okay? So it's the bitter herb for those of you who can't handle horseradish. So if you get invited, don't be afraid to accept an invitation to a Passover dinner. It won't be miserable for you. You'll enjoy it. Okay? And then this is the cherasith that I said looks ugly, but it tastes great. Okay? And at the top is the parsley that you dip. And most kids, you have to kind of talk them into this. But with our kids, we started doing it every year. And we'd dip it in the salt water. And then we'd eat the parsley. Sometimes you just nibble at the edge, but most of our kids just put it in their mouths and ate the whole thing. And one day we went to Russ's restaurant, and they served us something that was a little fancier than normal, and it was garnished with parsley. And the kids saw that parsley, and they went right for the salt shaker, screwed the top off, poured it in one of the glasses of water, and stirred it up, and everybody dipped their parsley in the salt water and ate their parsley. And I don't know if anyone saw us, but you can hardly stop them from doing it. You know, it's just like a lot of fun. This is probably a good time to tell the story about David's brother. This is not a David story. This is a Matthew story. When he was a boy, we came home while he had been alone in the garage just doing stuff. He was just old enough you could let him be for an hour. But we learned that day maybe an hour was too long to leave him alone. We came home. He had found a bucket of red paint opened the bucket, took a brush, went to the doorposts, and brushed red on both of the doorposts and the top lintel with red paint. Now, do you punish that boy? He was the firstborn male in our family. And he put paint on the lintel and the sides, and it was, we had a strong talk about the mistake of using paint, but there was no punishment involved in this because he was just acting out something that he had been taught. And it was in Dad's heart, I'm going, my son learned a good lesson here, even though now I've got to get out the paint thinner and clean up the mess he made. But are there any questions so far of what I've shown you? Like I said, we've got a few nice things. Let me just show you. This is something we had a Ukrainian family at our Passover a few years ago, and to thank us, they sent us these. And this has the horseradish in it, and then the cherasith would go in the other one. And it has a little lid, and it has a little silver spoon that goes with it. And so now it's at our Passover table every year. Not everyone has stuff like this, but most do. They've got at least something that they can use to hold the symbols. And then I showed you the salt water. And also we have some families have something to pass around the matzah. And this is a ceramic matzah dish, and you put it on the table. Are there any quick questions so far? Yes?
Comment. You pronounced it differently, but we call it cirrhosis, but you have another cherith, something other.
Right.
It's really what held the bricks together. You haven't
Right.
told us the significance
Okay.
of that.
At some point or another, I've got to leave things out. But that's good. She's exactly right. She's talking about the cherasith. And how did you pronounce it?
Cirrhosis.
Cherosis? Okay. Every group of Jews pronounces everything differently. I tried to learn the right pronunciations only to find out that it was only one of 10. So it all has different pronunciations. And yes, that little apple salad thing not only sweetens the bitter herbs, but it also represents the mortar that went between the bricks when they were enslaved. One more question? Okay, yes.
Is the biblical word hyssop?
Yes.
And does that really mean parsley?
No, it's hyssop is a plant, and it's bitter. I don't know if it's even eaten necessarily, but so this represents the hyssop. Okay. Now let's move on, and there will be time for questions at the end. Okay, the next portion of the service is the serious part, and this is where it all starts to come together. The missing piece of matzo is found. The kids are sent. In our family, somehow Matthew was always the one who found it. No matter how hard we tried, he managed to be the first one out, and so he always got the prize. And so one year he was banned from the game so that everyone else would get a chance. But it's searched for, and it's found. And then the father takes it out, and this is called the afikomen. And I sat down once, and I wrote down all that I could find that made this representative of Jesus. I got this from rabbinic teaching and from messianic teaching, and I'd like to share it with you because it's absolutely profound to know how this bread represents the body of Jesus Christ. It represents it in several different ways. First of all, it's the second piece of 3 that was in this matzah tosh, right? Now, how would that be significant? Every time you talk about the Trinity, How do you say it? Right, that's just natural. I've never heard it any other way. It's always the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, we don't find the Trinity that clearly delineated in Scripture, but we know the teaching, and we've distilled it, and we know that that the second is always Jesus. And so I took this from the middle pocket. Rabbis may say it represents unity, and I'm sure it does. But at the same time, it's very clear that it represents the second part of the Trinity, which is Jesus, the Son. Okay, then notice that it has stripes. The way it's made, maybe you can see it better with a whole piece, if I can find one. It's got stripes. And this is the way it's supposed to be made. It's set down in rabbinic writings that it's got to be made in this way, and therefore the stripes just come. Can anyone think of a prophecy in the Old Testament about Jesus that has to do with stripes? By his stripes we are healed. Okay, that's a prophecy in Isaiah, and it's the wounding that comes when someone is whipped. And he was whipped. And by his stripes, this was a prophecy about Jesus, that he would be whipped, and it's the punishment he took is what heals us. We're not talking about physical healing. I've heard it often interpreted that way. We're not talking about, I have no trouble understanding that God chooses to heal people physically. But that clearly is a prophecy about the stripes. We are healed of our sin because he took the punishment when he was whipped. Okay? And then, after noticing the stripes, notice that it's pierced through. You can see light come through from the other side. Can you see that? Can you see the piercings, all of the little holes? Okay. And so can anyone think of a prophecy involving being pierced that relates to Jesus Christ? Not just a prophecy, but, it was a prophecy. Anyone think of it? Okay, in Zechariah, the prophecy is that they will look on me, the one they have pierced. Okay, that's the prophecy. And did they pierce Jesus? Yes, no bones were broken, but he was pierced on the cross. Okay, the next thing, notice that I took the middle piece and I broke it. And we often talk of it that way. This is my body, Jesus said, broken for you. And so he made that comparison. And so here, Jewish families for centuries before Jesus and centuries after Jesus take the middle piece of matzah and break it. And Jesus said, this is my body, which has been broken for you. And then, notice that it was hidden. And then later, revealed. Doesn't that take us to a picture of Jesus again? His body was taken from the cross. It was hidden in a tomb and then ultimately revealed. And so we did the same thing. Again, Jewish families all over this country today commemorate Jesus' death by the use of the matzah and by hiding it for their children. Someone finds it and it's revealed once more. This is so clearly a picture of who Jesus is. And then remember, and this is probably the most important thing, is that this bread was made without leaven. And so by making it without leaven, we're saying that Jesus was without sin. Because the only one who could be sacrificed for sin, to forgive sin, is someone who has no sin. And Jesus has no sin. He was pure. And so this bread represents on 7 different levels the body of Jesus Christ. And so I want you together to, everyone take a piece of the bread at your tables. And I want you to remember that the night he was delivered up, Jesus took bread and gave thanks and broke the bread, and he gave it to his disciples. he said to them, "Take and eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." So you're starting to recognize this part of the meal. After dinner, Jesus took the cup. And he gave thanks and offered it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins." The people say, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who created the fruit of the vine." And the Father once again says, "Remember that Jesus' blood was shed for us to preserve us for everlasting life. Let us be thankful." I'll drink. What was the name of the first cup? Blessing. What was the name of the second cup? What was the name of the third cup? I haven't told you yet. No, but you're on the right track. The third cup is called the cup of redemption. How do we know that that was the time? Because we drink 4 times. How do we know that the cup of redemption is the cup that Jesus said is my blood? We know it because the scripture says after dinner, Jesus broke the bread and gave them the cup. And it's prescribed, it's been thousands of years, Jews for years have been taking the third cup after the meal and calling it redemption. So we know that when Jesus picked up the third cup, he was picking up the cup of redemption. And he said, "This is my blood." We know he wasn't speaking literally, so we understand that redemption comes through the death and the blood and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And I just find that absolutely amazing that the traditions that we celebrate here are all traditions that come together to tell the story of redemption through Jesus Christ's death on the cross. And we see it happen as we look at it. We're going to look at one more cup in a short while. But the cup we just drank from is the cup of redemption. And then it's important to know that we're not going to sing this morning, but Jesus sang a hymn. They were singing the Psalms, and the psalm that they sang was the 116th and the 117th. In fact, probably all the way from 113 to 118. That's what they were singing that morning or that night when they were celebrating. Now, we're going to do the fourth cup and give it a name. The fourth cup we can all take, and the people say, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine." And then we drink the cup. So the fourth cup has a name too, and its name is praise. This is a cup of praise, and it comes with the promise from Exodus, "I will take you as my own." Now, I'm going to pray a benediction, and then I'm going to say one more thing when I'm done with the prayer. Father in heaven, I thank you for how seriously everyone has taken this, listening very carefully and understanding that Jesus Christ actually appears in the Passover, the Jewish Passover that has been celebrated for so many centuries. Lord, it may seem odd, but I want to thank you for the Jewish people who have passed this on to us and have given us the perfect picture of our faith and our belief in Jesus. I also want to thank you for redemption. Thank you for the changed lives that are represented in this room, people who would stand up and say testimonially, "Jesus Christ changed my life when he forgave my sins." I want to thank you for that and say, go with us, keep us safe, and help us always be scholars and always learning. What a joy it is, in Jesus' name. One thing I want to close with, I did this ceremony once several years ago, and the church did not have I asked them if they, what I should bring, and they said, we'll bring the matzah. Okay, so I brought enough matzah just for me up front, and all the other things I needed. And they had a whole meal. They prepared a wonderful meal. It was just delicious. But they couldn't find any matzah. And the pastor apologized, here we have all these people and no matzah. He said, so we went out and we bought tortillas. But they were corn tortillas, and so they didn't have flour in them, and so technically they might not be kosher, but they were close enough because they had corn tortillas. And that's what they used. And so I told that story at the end of every celebration. When we do this celebration, the last thing that usually happens is, well, there are two last things. One is we check to see if Elijah's cup has gone down, because there's a cup here just for Elijah. I've been drinking out of it tonight. Don't tell him, okay? But if he shows, that cup is for him and that plate is for him if Elijah shows. And then after we've looked to see, the little children will look at the cup and try to decide if it's gone down a little bit. Maybe he showed up and sipped and then disappeared. But so that's what the little children are concerned about. And then the last thing we say is, next year in Jerusalem. And so it might not happen, but that's our wish. We'd like to have Passover next year in Jerusalem. So I told my family about the church that gave me tortillas instead of matzah. And at the end of the dinner, my wife Barbara says, next year in Mexico City. She has a great sense of humor. And let's close with that, okay? I've already given you your benediction. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you spending the time with me. And I just love doing this, so you've been a blessing to me just by participating. So God bless you, scholars. Thank you. We all set here?